here we are with David Schwartz, the CTO of Ripple. David, so excited to have you here on the Defiant podcast. Welcome.
It's great to be here, Camila.
So, super excited. Ripple has been obviously a very important part of the cryptocurrency industry for a long time. It's one of the OG coins out there, XRP. Launched back in 2012. It's now the 7th largest crypto by market cap with $30 billion in market cap. Ripple has also been, I guess, famous in crypto for fighting the SEC. And now very recently, it announced its own stablecoin. So we'll get into all of this. But just to start from the beginning, I'd love it, David, if you can tell us what the founding story is for Ripple.
So the founding story of Ripple dates back to the day when the only cryptocurrency that exists was Bitcoin and a couple of clones that were essentially identical copies of Bitcoin. No significant changes to the architecture or the code. And it began with an idea that proof of work wasn't what made Bitcoin so special. So at the time, because proof of work was the biggest new thing in Bitcoin, there had been a number of previous cryptocurrency type projects that didn't really get off the ground, like B-Money and Hashcash. And the thing that made Bitcoin different from its predecessors was proof of work. That was like the incremental improvement. And so it's natural to think that if Bitcoin is like so much better than its predecessors and proof of work is what's new in it, that proof of work is what makes it so much better. But what we started to realize, even back then, was that what made it so great was the fact that the ledger is public, that it's a distributed ledger, that everybody knows what the transaction rules are, that transactions are public, essentially the lack of administrative functions, that it was decentralization that made Bitcoin so great, and that essentially proof of work was just how Bitcoin solved the double spend problem. And the other thing that we started thinking about in the early days was that people were saying that Bitcoin would be great because everybody would just use Bitcoin for everything. But every payment system is great if everybody uses it for everything. The problem with payment systems is that there are so many of them, and there aren't a whole lot of them, they're for no good reason. It isn't just that everybody created their own because, they have different features, like they are in different jurisdictions. There are payment systems that are tied to jurisdictions. There are payment systems that have very high-speed payments. And if you think about it, the way you buy a multi-million-dollar piece of property and the way you buy a stick of gum probably shouldn't be the same. Like, there's very good reasons why they should have different characteristics. And so what we started to think about was a payment system that was decentralized, that had the features that we thought were the best about Bitcoin: no administrative functions, decentralization, everybody can enforce all of the system's rules, but that was a multi-currency system that could be faster and cheaper. We also kind of bought into the be your own bank, no middlemen, and miners or block producers are middlemen in the sense that they have interests that are different from the people who transact, like they want high transaction fees. Whereas obviously if you use the system, you probably want low transaction fees. So to focus on this sort of rapid, low-cost payments, cross-currency, cross-issuer interoperability, we designed the XRP ledger roughly June of 2012. And because it doesn't have proof of work, there's no way that it can allocate currency. So it has 100 billion XRP. Initially, it just sort of sits in the Genesis account. And we built what we thought would become a new approach to global financial transactions. In about September of 2012, Jed McCaleb, myself, Chris Larson, Arthur Brito, a couple of other people, Stephen Thomas, created Ripple, the company, to develop software to support the new financial infrastructure, to distribute XRP, and to use XRP as a bridge currency, like in payments. It wasn't that long before we figured out that like institutional adoption kind of wouldn't happen by itself. We're also a key contributor to the XRP ledger, bringing features like real-world asset tokenization, DeFi, new features like the automated market maker. Our focus as a company has been very much on financial institutions using digital assets, XRP, to lower costs with cross-border payments, using it as a source of liquidity, using it as an intermediary asset. But because it's a decentralized ledger, everybody's welcome to use it, however they want.
Awesome. Great overview. So we have XRP, the cryptocurrency. XRP Ledger, that's the network, the distributed network or blockchain. And Ripple Labs, which is the company building for XRP Ledger. I understand there's also something called RippleNet. Is that right? Is that also a part of the ecosystem?
So RippleNet is it's a division within Ripple. I guess we call the product Ripple Payments. But the idea is to provide institutional payments that can settle with digital assets like XRP. One of the problems that we discovered really quickly is that you kind of need to get institutional adoption. If you look at features like the internet, a lot of the early adoption was universities, it was military, it was large companies, and that kind of paved the way for more grassroots adoption. And everybody in the industry was focused directly on grassroots adoption. So we realized somebody would have to make institutional products. Like if banks were going to use digital assets to settle their payments, somebody would have to make bank-grade software and systems that could settle with digital assets. And so we developed, gone through a number of name changes. We currently usually call the product Ripple Payments, but the division inside the company that builds this is called RippleNet. And this is a proprietary product. It's owned and managed by Ripple. It's sold to financial institutions, mostly non-bank financial institutions, but also banks, payment companies, large corporates to make institutional payments. And a big feature of RippleNet is that it can settle with a digital asset. It doesn't have to. So you can use it for, any number of payments use cases. Many just don't fit a digital asset. For example, if it's domestic payments within divisions of the same company, it would be really weird. If one branch of a company owes another branch of a company in the U.S. dollars, it'd be weird to settle with XRP. But you can settle and also like in the early days, there were very few payments that could settle with XRP. There weren't a lot of corridors. There wasn't a lot of liquidity. That's increased significantly since then. So the idea is get institutions using a payment system that can settle with XRP. Then as the infrastructure, on-ramps, off-ramps, and liquidity is available, there's no obstacle to them using XRP to settle their payments. So that's RippleNet. You can kind of think of Ripple as having two halves, RippleNet, which is like enterprise software for institutional payments, and then RippleX, which is all the XRP Ledger and DeFi stuff.
Got it. And before we get into deeper into kind of the use case and activity side of things, you mentioned that the XRP Ledger was its inception included 100 billion of XRP reserves. Can you talk about the XRP tokenomics of it? Like how is XRP issued, and how does that help incentivize participation in the network? Like if I'd love to understand a bit better how the Ripple or XRP Ledger, like the blockchain, actually works.
So it has a very different incentive model from pretty much every other blockchain out there. I wouldn't necessarily argue it's better. I mean, I'd like to think it's better, but the argument is not necessarily that like everybody else did it wrong and we did it right, but that there's room in the marketplace for different approaches that have different strengths and weaknesses. And you should look at the strengths and weaknesses of different technologies to find the one that's the best fit. So the XRP Ledger's consensus model that we call proof of association is not competitive. People are not fighting for rewards. They're cooperating to verify transactions as quickly as possible. It's a cooperative process. It doesn't have any competitive mechanism. So it can't decide, if there's a reward to be given out, you want it. And if you get it, then however much reward you get, I can't get. So you and I are sort of fighting each other for the reward. The XRP Ledger does not have a sort of competitive consensus mechanism. It has a cooperative consensus mechanism where you and I are working together to settle transactions as quickly as possible. And the reason we do that is because we want the XRP Ledger to be fast and efficient and decentralized. Now, you couldn't expect people to, for example, mine Bitcoin for free, right? Like if I said, let's just not pay people for proof of work, people will just do proof of work because they want Bitcoin to work. That would never work because proof of work is, by definition, the whole concept is that it's expensive to provide. The proof of association is not expensive to provide. It's very cheap. And because it's not a competitive process, it's a very simple cooperative process. People just basically put transactions in order essentially by sorting them. Computers are very good at it. They can do it very quickly. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages of the XRP Ledger's sort of proof of association approach. One advantage is that it's fast and cheap. XRP Ledger transactions can clear in a few seconds. They cost a tiny fraction of a second. There has never been a significant change in ledger capacity, or there's never been a spike in fees because nobody benefits from that. Everybody just wants the transactions to clear as quickly as possible. Now, the disadvantage is Nobody has a sort of inherent, nobody's paid to do the consensus process. But exchanges need to clear transactions. People who use the XRP ledger, if you're a wallet provider, if you have any business that's connected with the blockchain in any way, you have an incentive to get that blockchain to work efficiently. And so that cooperation is what keeps the blockchain going. Because it's proof of association, what that means is that if participants are malicious and they're not helping the network come to consensus quickly, people will just ignore them. You can't force somebody else to listen to you. And if people are doing a good job of making the consensus process run smoothly and efficiently, they will stick around. So essentially, anybody who maliciously tries to interfere with the consensus process will eventually just get ignored. And then people who participate, cooperatively will stick. And the important thing is that is not the XRP ledger's primary governance mechanisms. That's another sort of thing that we sort of figured out, which is the primary governance method for any blockchain is going to be the software that people run. So in other words, if you participate in the Bitcoin ecosystem, you run a piece of software that determines what transactions you will accept and which you won't. And nobody can ever make your software accept a transaction it won't accept. So like if I wanted to abuse the XRP ledger by, creating XRP or stealing your XRP, nobody would let me do, literally nobody would let me do that. Like there is nobody who has a piece of software on the XRP ledger. I would, certainly, unless they deliberately wanted, if you want to make your software say nonsense, you can certainly make your own computer tell you nonsense. But the software just doesn't allow any sort of abuse. And so the only attack that's left is to sort of slow things down or confuse them. And if anybody did that, people would just stop listening to them. So again, the advantage is it's cheap, it's fast, it's efficient. People are only participating because they want it to be fast, cheap, and efficient. The disadvantage is you could imagine a scenario where there weren't enough people who were willing to run the consensus algorithm. Even though the cost is low, the cost is not zero. So you have a bit of a public good problem. It's like, it's just like if, you had a whole bunch of farmers that had access to some public land and everybody might want to graze on the land so much that they destroy it. And like if we could cooperate, to share that land, we would all benefit. And the factor that sort of helps is there's really no benefit to causing harm. If you cause harm in the ecosystem, you might slow the ledger down. You might even disable it for a short period of time, but you would very quickly just not get, people would just very quickly stop listening to you. So there's really no incentive to attack it. It seems to work quite well. I mean, it's been going on for more than a decade, and it's been clearing ledgers, every 5 to 7 seconds at virtually zero cost.
That's super interesting. And what about if there's no incentive to participate and to clear transactions, other than you're a part of this ecosystem, you want it to work? What can prevent people from colluding to steal a bunch of XRP? There's
no steal XRP message that you can send. Like there's nothing you can tell my software that will cause it to make your XRP somebody else's XRP. Like Bitcoin has the same thing. Like there's no way in Bitcoin to say, hey, those 10 Bitcoin that belong to Alice, just give them to Bob for no reason. Like you must provide a signed transaction to do that. The only problem that you can't fix so virtually every problem is simply solved by the fact that every node enforces every rule. The only problem you can't solve that way is the double spend problem, right? The only problem that you can't solve that way is if I have 10 Bitcoin or 10 XRP and I try to send those same 10 XRP to 2 different people. And the only thing you need to do to fix that is agree on a global order. Whichever transaction comes first is valid. Whichever one comes second is invalid. What the proof of association process does on the XRP ledger is it globally puts transactions in order. And it's very binary. It's either working or it's not. The only way that you could sort of attack the XRP ledger was to stop that global ordering from working. And that would just cause the whole network to halt. So really the only plausible attack on the XRP ledger is just to stop it. And there's really no incentive to launch an attack like that because it's very hard to imagine how you would turn that into revenue or how you would benefit from that. And again, as soon as somebody caused the XRP ledger to halt, people would just stop listening to them. So proof of association means I listen to you and I try to agree on a global ordering with you because I identify you by some sort of identity. And so if you're just acting like a jerk and breaking the system, I'll just stop listening to you. So the idea is good actors will accumulate, bad actors will sort of fall by the wayside. But that also means that it can't distribute the XRP by itself, right? So like many blockchains like Ethereum uses proof of stake to allocate the digital asset. Bitcoin uses it proof of work. So the XRP ledger doesn't have any competitive process to allocate XRP, which is another reason we had to form some company to do that.
I guess like one reason I'd imagine people would want to attack the system is if they were short XRP, like you'd imagine XRP might fall in value if the network stops, and that might be an incentive to want to attack it. Has the network ever been attacked?
Not that way. There have been just sort of generic, sort of like, let's bomb the network with garbage kind of attacks. No one has ever tried an attack at that level of sophistication. You're right that is a risk. There are both theoretical and practical reasons why you probably shouldn't worry too much about that attack. So one theoretical reason is like, if people, to the extent to which people let you short XRP, they should be aware of this attack. And so you wouldn't let somebody short XRP to such a great extent that the attack will work, because the attack is an attack on essentially the person who lets them short XRP, right? That's the counterparty who loses money. The practical reason that doesn't work is that in order to launch the attack, you have to accumulate trust through proof of association. And if you think about how proof of association works, the only thing you're worried about is that attack. Right? Like when you choose the participants that you're willing to work with to come to consensus, your sole criteria is they're not going to collude to break the network. So if you're specifically choosing people by their unlikelihood to collude to break the network, and nevertheless they still collude to break the network, you're like the worst at choosing possible. And if you compare it to things like Bitcoin or Ethereum, Bitcoin, whoever has the most essentially proof of work can launch that exact same type of attack. And so being forced to choose whoever has the most money versus being able to choose who you get to who being able to choose, it's hard to imagine how being forced to trust the party that has the most money like is somehow a better model. But in practice, like it's an extremely difficult attack to launch, and you would only be able to halt the network once for a fairly short period of time. So, and you would have to accumulate that trust. So from a practical standpoint, to the extent that you worry about a double spend attack in Bitcoin, which is you should understand it, and everybody should know that attack is possible and what the mitigations are. I would say this is kind of in the same category. You worry about it, no, but should people understand it and understand the mitigations? Yeah, I think so. Because that is the attack that's left. It never happened.
Super interesting stuff. And just a quick note on that: how many nodes are there in the network today?
Yeah, I think last I checked, there were about 600 nodes, of which a little over 100 of them were actually participating in the validation process, kind of analogous to full nodes versus nodes that are actually mining, like in Bitcoin. So I think there's about 600 full nodes and about 120 of them participating in the consensus process.
Okay, got it. Okay, and then going to the distribution of XRP, you mentioned there's the Ripple company, which is tasked with distributing the cryptocurrency. So how does this process work?
When the XRP ledger was first created, and if you created like a new version of the ledger, the same thing would happen. The software creates what we call the Genesis account, and it puts all the XRP in the Genesis account. So in 2012 or so, when the chain that survived was fired up, it created 100 billion XRP in the Genesis account. The original founders took some of that XRP per an agreement with the company, and they gifted about 80 billion of it to the company, to Ripple. What's also interesting is there were a lot of early participants who also took XRP from that Genesis account. So there actually have some people who have some XRP that's traceable to them basically taking it from the Genesis account the same way the founders did. So the roughly 80 billion XRP that Ripple got was gifted to Ripple by the original founders who took the XRP from the Genesis account. Sort of Ripple's original thinking was to try to distribute that XRP kind of as quickly as possible and sort of give it out to the world. We didn't really originally think that we would be holding on to a large amount of XRP for a long period of time. But it was kind of interesting what happened. As soon as somebody could turn around and sell XRP for money, but when there wasn't a market for XRP, it had near zero value. And this was true for a long time, a tiny, tiny fraction of a penny. There was no incentive for somebody to try to trick Ripple into giving them XRP or something. People would only take XRP if they had some use for it, if they wanted to experiment with the ledger. And so we did giveaways. We did a giveaway on the Bitcoin Talk forum and so on. And then as soon as XRP was something that you could turn around and sell for money, in an instant, then if we're giving away $10 worth of XRP, someone would be willing to spend up to $9.50 to game the giveaway. And it became impossible to give XRP away. And even when people participated in the giveaway, they would just turn around and sell it because if they wanted it, they would have bought it, right? If they wanted it at fair value, they would have bought it. And so if they didn't buy it, and it became an interesting challenge for us. And as a result, we still have a significant amount of XRP, close to more than half the XRP we started with. I think we still have about 45 billion. And it's not a bad problem to have. It's an interesting problem to have, but it's actually surprisingly challenging to use the asset like in an effective way to like encourage people to use the XRP ledger. Effectively, everything we do becomes somewhat equivalent to selling it. So it's because it is, if you can trade $10 worth of XRP for $10 and $10 for $10 worth of XRP, you're sort of indifferent to those two things. You treat them as effectively having the same thing. And money is hard to, it's hard to give away. It's an interesting situation that we're in. And so we've continued to build the payment system. And we're launching a stable coin because the XRP ledger doesn't have any high quality stable coins, and evidence seems to show that like stable coins are instrumental to DeFi, adding new features to the XRP ledger. And then we also have this big pile of XRP.
Protocol 20 introduces Sorbonne, which is Stellar's cutting edge smart contracts platform. This creates new surface area for innovation and provides new opportunities for developers to build protocols and products that create access to everyday financial services. So it means a gradual increase in transaction capacity and a chance to fine-tune applications. And it's the most transformative upgrade to the Stellar network to date. Woohoo!
So it's interesting, like there's no set mechanism for XRP to be issued. Like you're not like using it to periodically reward like users or devs or nothing like that. It's like more kind of ad hoc sales.
Kind of has to be because we're a company, and like you can't just sort of give money without like knowing who you're giving money to. There's certain we are a U.S. corporation.
Tell that to the airdrop people.
Yeah, no, I know. It's funny too. We're fairly conservative from a regulatory standpoint. We stayed out of like the exchange business because like if you go to your account on an exchange and you go to withdraw Bitcoin, you just enter in an address that you want the Bitcoin sent to, and they don't know who you're sending that money to. Like we're surprisingly conservative. We have regulated services for banks. We have, any number of licenses as a payments company. We have a bit license. Like airdrop. I know lots of companies like, you can just give airdrops. Yeah, we can't. So we do have an enormous number of programs to incentivize, to incentivize developers. We do events. We build technology. We have like an XRPL grants program that we started in 2021. We committed $1 billion XRP to accelerate development. We hold events for developers like Apex coming up in Amsterdam. We hold hackathons. We built a learning portal. We have an accelerator program to help startups and young projects learn to develop. But giving it away kind of becomes very difficult. If I offer you $10 to do something, you'll do it even if it's not something that you want to do. But we want to find the people who want to do things. You know what I mean? Like paying people to do things they don't want to do. As soon as those incentives go away, they'll suffer something that isn't a good fit if you pay them to do it. So you have to be very careful. It's actually been surprisingly challenging. It turns out to be a much harder problem. Here I am 10 years later when I thought we would probably give away most, if not all, of our XRP in like 3 to 4 years. But it turns out it's actually hard.
That's so funny to hear you say this because, it sounds pretty reasonable and obvious that you just, you don't want to just give your crypto away to people who, because it like messes with the incentives, right? But I mean, it's effectively how much of crypto, or at least DeFi, is operating right now. Like most projects are using their tokens specifically to incentivize use, and they're hoping that once these people who are farming the token use their product, some of them will stick around. Kind of, it's a bit of like a marketing tactic to use the token. But it's interesting how you've basically, have ignored this game, I guess, or chosen a different path.
We have directly. First of all, we don't have retail customers. We don't have retail products really. So, we're not an exchange. We're not a wallet operator. We're not a developer of retail products so much. So it really wouldn't make sense for us to do that directly. We don't have, we have customers, but that's on the payments institutional side. Now, we do have partnerships with companies that do use that as a customer acquisition mechanism, and that's perfectly fine as long as you're paying people and you have a reasonable expectation that they'll like what you pay them to get them in the door, right? But if they don't like what they see and they're only there because you pay them, then obviously the business is going to collapse as soon as the incentive's up. You have to be careful to make sure that you actually have something, and you don't always know for sure. NFTs were really big for a while, and there were many use cases that during the hype cycle looked really, really exciting. And now some assets like, the carbon markets and certain collectibles, assets that are connected to games that allow you to do things, assets connected to real world, events. Those kinds of things look like, sometimes you don't know in the short term what's going to work and what's not. We do definitely, we do grants. And some of those companies use those grants for customer acquisition, and that's perfectly legitimate. But again, you just have to be careful to make sure that you aren't just getting people in, you aren't just paying people to come in the door, and then as soon as the incentives stop, they'll go away. You just have to vet them carefully. We as a company, Ripple, don't just try to spread, a token everywhere in the hopes that some of it will land with people who will do something constructive with it.
Super interesting. Going back to RippleNet and payments and how Ripple is being used today. So you said that you've built this payment software that can accept crypto, but it doesn't always. Can you dive a bit deeper on how Ripple, the Ripple ecosystem is being used today? Like how many financial institutions are using this software? How many are actually using XRP or crypto, and how many are using just the software for payments? I'd love to kind of get a sense of the activity that's happening today.
So we adjusted over time. At first, we just wanted to get as many customers as possible, and we wanted to understand, how they were using the network and where the opportunities were to use XRP and digital assets for settlement. And then for a long time, our focus was exclusively on customers that would use XRP for settlement. Today, it's kind of somewhere in between those two approaches. It's difficult for us to use XRP for settlement in the United States right now because of litigation issues. So a lot of our expansion has been in the Middle East, in Asia, South America, Europe, in those kinds of areas. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but the way our customers use it is as a payment product, as an institutional payment product. Customers use it for use cases like their own internal treasury functions, like remittances and so on. And again, this is an institutional sort of traditional finance product, but in many cases it uses XRP as the intermediary asset. So a good example would be a customer who wants to send, let's say, a remittance payment from the United States to Mexico. And so what they can do is they can buy XRP at an exchange in the United States, send it to an exchange in Mexico on the XRP ledger, and then use essentially an off-ramp. They sell the XRP for Mexican pesos, and they use an off-ramp that's actually connected to the Mexican exchange. And as a result, in maybe 60 to 80 seconds, they've completed a payment from all the way from U.S. funds down to Mexican pesos. And most of these corridors are open, they don't close on holidays, right? They're open whenever. The domestic outbound payment might be delayed until the domestic payment system is open, but the rest of the payment path can take place at any time. And what's nice about that is the only reason why people generally wouldn't want to use a digital asset for settlement other than regulatory issues is volatility, because the price, can change. You don't have to hold the digital asset for more than, 80 seconds. And if you think about the volatility of XRP over 80 seconds and you compare it to holding Mexican pesos through the weekend, right? Even though XRP is more volatile than Mexican pesos, XRP in 2 minutes is not more volatile than Mexican pesos over a holiday weekend. The other advantage is that many payment solutions either have high cost because you're using other people's capital, or you have to keep piles of capital in every corridor that you might want to pay out in. So if you wanted to pay out in Mexico, you might have to keep Mexican pesos in Mexico. But if you don't know how many Mexican pesos you need, you have to hold more than you need. And you also might have a pile of euros in Europe and a pile of dollars in the United States and so on. The advantage of using a digital asset is you can hold a big pile of your local currency. You can hold a big pile of dollars, and you can convert that into whatever currency you need immediately in the destination country. So if you need Mexican pesos in Mexico, you can have them in less than a minute anytime, day or night, holiday. And so that creates a great experience for customers where they don't have to pre-fund, all around the world. They don't have to anticipate which corridors they're going to need funds in. Again, that's a regulated institutional product. The big thing about it from Ripple's standpoint, and the reason we built it, is because it can, settle with a cryptocurrency. It's also a distribution channel for enterprise DeFi. Like Ripple's company strategy on the Ripple Net side especially is around bringing institutions access to DeFi products and services that probably not existing ones that won't meet the regulatory requirements, but future like true DeFi applications that can meet the regulatory requirements. And this is a distribution channel of companies that are already running our software in their payment flows. And so like lending products, real world asset, like tokenization of securities, tokenization of financial products, serving future customers, through crypto payment channels and crypto on crypto blockchains. These are financial institutions that are already running Ripple software right in their payment and customer flows.
Right now, would you say most of volume for Ripple is cross-border transfers?
Yeah, we focus for, in the early days, we would pretty much just take anyone who wanted to do anything because we just wanted to get, as much volume as possible so that we could be strategic later about what corridors. And then we looked at what corridors, first of all, where a digital asset would be competitive. So if you have a shortage of customers, you'll take anyone who walks in the door. But when you have your choice of who you're going to target, you think about what makes the most strategic sense. And obviously, we built the network to settle with XRP. So we're like, let's find customers who are, have the best candidate to settle for XRP. And we just targeted non-bank financial institutions. Banks, obviously, getting a big bank is a huge score, but they're very slow movers and they have the least appetite for risk. And most importantly, they're the least agile. So what's going to happen is, like, even if we gave them a product or service that could provide benefits to their customers, they generally won't provide those benefits to their customers. There's a variety of reasons why they won't do that. One of them is that, like, then they're sort of dependent on us. And if our service stops, they have to tell their customers that they're going to get worse service. No bank wants to take that risk. The other problem is, imagine if your bank told you that some of your payments would be fantastic. You'd be like, well, why aren't the other ones fantastic? We couldn't do everything. And so we focused on businesses that could become Ripple success cases where they would say, hey, Ripple, where it was a good fit. We said, look, here's a case. You're doing remittances in the United States to Mexico. You could settle with XRP. It makes sense. And then you could provide better cost and better features for your customers. You could provide them, better telemetry of where their payments are or services on days and nights and weekends when they wouldn't ordinarily get services, where they'll push the benefits all the way down to the customer. So we focused on the customers that align with our strategy. And that initially that was non-bank FIs, largely remittance use cases where they would be willing to settle with XRP, where it made sense for them because we had sort of, we could choose who to target. And so now, I think certainly all of our new customers are customers who are using digital assets of some kind to settle. XRP doesn't work in every corridor, and it isn't always the most economic. And we made a decision that, like, we wouldn't turn a customer away because they couldn't use the model that, like, we like best. Like, we want to give our customers the best experiences. We want to provide them a vast array of services, and then it's on us to make the technologies that we want work the best, where the markets are. And so that's kind of where we are now.
Okay, so that means, so right now, are non-bank financial institutions still your main users, your main clients?
So, we're looking at other target customers. Crypto natives, I think, are a big up and coming area, which are like companies that provide services to customers who are crypto aware. So, like, if you look at, like, a traditional customer of ours might have been a company like MoneyGram. Like, they do remittances. They have retail customers, but the retail customers don't really care what goes on behind the scenes. All they know is that they put dollars in, and Mexican pesos come out. I think a new target for us, I guess two new areas. So one of them is crypto natives, which are companies that are, like, providing services to customers who are crypto aware, like they're providing on-ramps and off-ramps and exchange services and payments right out of crypto wallets. One of the reasons they have the regulatory appetite, to use a digital asset because they're already using digital assets in their customer flows, and also because they're facing more friction. So if you have a perfect solution, you can take on use cases that are already pretty efficient, but where you're still sort of working, where you're trying to, like, get everything dialed in. If you start with a customer who has more problems already, you don't have to be as good to be a lot better. And so it makes sense to target the customers that are getting the worst experiences in the traditional financial system first. And obviously, crypto natives fall into that. I think another area is small to medium enterprises, because they're not as well served as they could be, and because they are more sort of willing to try new things. So these are companies that could, like on the very large end, they're companies like Amazon, Uber, Airbnb, companies that have to make payments throughout the world to like tens of thousands of endpoints. Like a traditional company, if you had to make large numbers of small retail payments, they were through physical stores to people who walked in the door. But typically, you wouldn't even do that, right? You would accept payments from lots of customers if you had a physical store, but you didn't have tens of thousands of vendors that you were making payments to. But Amazon does, right? They have something like 35,000 vendors. Uber has every driver, they have to make payments to. And so these types of small to medium enterprises that have these unusual use cases that are poorly served by traditional, Uber needs to make a payment on Christmas because, you drove because you didn't have enough money to buy a Christmas present or something. Like they want that money in your pocket immediately. So those types of and the very largest can hire hundreds of payment engineers, right? Like Airbnb, Uber, Amazon, probably they've already spent probably $1 billion each on solving these problems. But if you want to compete with them, you want to be a small to medium enterprise playing in that pond. Do you want to spend $1 billion hiring hundreds of payment engineers to be able to? No, right? You want some other solution. And so those are good target markets. Banks, it's very sexy when you close a deal with the bank, and we do that sometimes, but they're very slow movers. They're very slow to execute. They're very conservative. They're never going to be Ripple success stories. And it's hard to get them to push the benefits down to their customers because that's risky for them. And then it highlights where they're inefficient. So we focused a lot on banks in the beginning just because a press release with a bank is a big thing, but we discovered they're just very slow to move. Like if all they want is a press release, now we're like, hey, we want to actually move billions of dollars now. And they're like, yeah, we kind of don't.
So that makes sense. Okay, so right now it's still financial institutions like MoneyGram doing remittances, and then the next focus will be companies that need to make global payments, like something like an Uber competitor maybe, who doesn't want to spend so much money on all these payment engineers, and crypto natives like on and off ramps will be your next focus as well. And to get a sense of the volume that you're actually doing right now with your current clients, how much are you moving? I don't know, what's a good measure, daily or monthly?
No, it's funny. I actually don't recall the volume number on RippleNet. So I'm mostly on the DeFi XRP ledger side, and so I can't remember. I don't remember that number offhand. Sorry.
And like a ballpark, even if it's not.
I mean, it's in the billions, but I don't.
Okay, no worries. I can follow up later on that. But okay, so that's all kind of the payment side, which has been your main use case up until today, and now you're developing more DeFi use cases. And I guess it really did make sense for you guys to start to launch a stable coin. Your main thing has been payments, and like you said, even if it's not very attractive to do payments with volatile assets, even if you're holding it overnight or whatever, I think people will still prefer something that's closer to the dollar to make those remittances and cross-border transfers. So yeah, when I saw the announcement that Ripple was launching a stablecoin, it was of course, it does make total sense. So I'd love to dive deeper on the stablecoin XRPL. So it makes sense, because of your use case and your ecosystem, but still, how do you differentiate from all the other stablecoins out there?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, I think that it isn't a winner-take-all kind of universe. I think stablecoins are big in DeFi ecosystems for a number of use cases where you do need an asset that's stable, and you also need an asset that's the asset that you think about. I think about my net worth or how much something costs or how much I made from something in dollars. And when I can hold a stable coin denominated in dollars, the value is sort of fixed. And there's obviously a lot of use cases for holding something that has that sort of fixed value that you don't have to really worry about, like fluctuation. And I think that there's not going to be just one, because we have these decentralized blockchains like the XRP ledger, like Ethereum, and if one stablecoin becomes like dominant, then it sort of destroys the advantages of the decentralized, like counterparty free blockchain. If you have this one counterparty that if they collapse or have some sort of shock or their asset depegs, they sort of devastate the entire DeFi ecosystem. So I don't think it's a winner take all. I think there's different jurisdictions. I think like Tether is sort of jurisdictionally different from Circle. There's advantages and disadvantages. Ripple will be sort of jurisdictionally different from Tether and from Circle. And so it'll not only be another choice, but it will also be different in ways. The sort of risk profile will be different. And so I think there's room for multiple stablecoins to be successful. I think there's a sort of a lack of good tokens on the XRP ledger, particularly good stablecoins. It's not that there aren't stablecoins. There are. GateHub has one. I think Corium or Sologenic has one. But having like really good stable coins, I think, evidence has shown on other blockchains that they increase the utility of the DeFi ecosystems on those blockchains. We have a feature recently launched on the XRP ledger called the AMM. It's an automated market maker feature that works together with our decentralized exchange. And you have to have, you can't, in order to trade between two assets, you have to have two assets. And where things work well is when you have a volatile asset and a non-volatile asset. And for people who want to hold funds, over a period of time where they're not doing any of those funds, or you want to use funds for collateral, like if let's say you're doing fancy DeFi stuff and maybe you've got loans and you've got digital assets that have movement, but you need collateral to sort of cover, your potential losses, like a margin account. Having your collateral be volatile makes it just, it's not a great experience for people. So we definitely think that like having a high quality stablecoin on the XRP ledger will help to make DeFi use cases like the lending protocol. And like the lending protocol, you want to borrow dollars probably. Like most people, you only want to borrow a digital asset if you're doing something really weird. Like if you just like want to borrow money for like the reasons people normally want to borrow money, like you don't have money right now and you want to buy a car, you don't want your debt denominated in a very volatile asset unless you're in a very unusual situation where you really like risk, right? You want that debt denominated in dollars or, in your local currency. So we think that like having a high quality stablecoin both on the XRP ledger and in other places, on the XRP ledger, we think it'll turbocharge some of those DeFi use cases like lending real world assets. Like if you sell a real world asset, you don't want to have the hot potato out of a digital asset because you didn't want if you want the exposure to digital asset, that's great. But we want people who don't want exposure to digital assets to be able to participate in these DeFi ecosystems so they can grow as well. And it's not a pivot away from XRP because the XRP is the XRP ledger's like native token. It's its gas token. It's what you pay transaction fees with. And the XRP ledger has features like auto bridging that kind of put XRP in a central role, providing liquidity between other assets. And so the more other assets there are, the more opportunities there are for XRP to bridge between those assets. So we think it's a win all around.
You talked about jurisdictional differences between Tether, Circle's USDC, and XRPL. Can you expand on that? Like how is it different?
USDC is essentially it has a United States jurisdictional nexus. Tether doesn't have a United States jurisdictional nexus. It's a little more complicated. So depending on like what your risk profile is and what your sort of like if you're a US regulated company, it might be easier for you to, use USDC rather than Tether or to hold it. Or you might need to diversify because you might be able to, there might be too much risk in holding a large amount that's got, these different profiles. And so it's a different risk profile. Like, if you're an enterprise company, you're not just going to hold a stable coin. You're going to do a risk analysis. You're going to look what licensing do they have, what jurisdiction are they in, how much revenue do they. So Ripple has a tremendous amount of money in their, on their balance sheet. Ripple has an enormous amount of capital, just sitting around. That helps to create, that helps to create trust. And then that this, it's just a different risk profile.
And so just to clarify, your Ripple's jurisdiction is the U.S., right?
The stablecoin will be in a U.S. jurisdiction. Ripple will issue it using its money transmitter licenses. So the way the stablecoin will work is that Ripple will issue it to to qualified investors who are Ripple customers. Maybe Ripple Net customers will be able to get the stablecoin directly from Ripple, and that will be done in jurisdictions where Ripple has licenses like U.S. money transmitter licenses or a trust license or something similar, and it'll be regulated by the states that issue those money transmitter and trust licenses.
Got it. Okay, I think that's similar to how USDC works.
Yes, is exactly right. It's a very similar regulatory profile to USDC.
And in terms of collateral backing XRPL, is it one-to-one with US dollar and like liquid assets like treasuries, or how is it made up?
When Ripple issues the stablecoin, it'll be one-to-one backed with treasury, cash or treasury like cash-like assets.
Will you include like other sort, like, I don't know, Tether also had other investments like commercial paper, I think it had other digital assets. Of course, there's like other stablecoins that directly use digital assets. Like, will you use, for example, XRP to back your stablecoin?
No, it will be backed by cash or cash equivalent assets. Obviously, that policy could change at some point, but that would be, we'll be very clear to the public. But our present intention is to back it completely with cash or cash equivalents like treasuries.
Got it. And obviously, a big focus has been put on transparency around collateral backing these stable coins. So how will you make sure that, or like, what are your plans to provide transparency on how your stable coin is backed?
Regular audits. There'll be a lot more details to come later.
Great. And then another innovation that's happening right now in the stablecoin space is how issuers are starting to pass on yield generated from treasuries held as collateral. Is that in the works at all?
We're going to see what we'll have to see. There's regulatory challenges with doing that, but we'll try to come up with, we'll see what we can come up with.
I'd love to talk more about how the stablecoin will be used in this like burgeoning DeFi ecosystem that's on XRP Ledger. So you mentioned a couple of products. There's the AMM, the lending platform. What's the status of these different products? Like, are they live now, or are they in the works? Kind of, will they be launched after the stablecoin? Like, what's the status of development?
The AMM is live now. The AMM feature, was accepted. It was accepted by the network. It was voted on by the governance process and went live, and it's operational right now. It provides liquidity between any pairs of tokens on the XRP that are available on the XRP ledger. It integrates with the XRP ledger's order book system. We have a decentralized exchange that uses order book, which is generally more capital efficient than AMMs, but isn't as good as like covering a long tail of tokens. AMMs are a little less capital efficient in providing liquidity, but they also allow a return for the people who sort of lend assets to the AMM pools. Our AMM has a unique feature that we call the continuous auction mechanism, which essentially converts a lot of revenue that would normally go to arbitrageurs into yield for the liquidity providers. So it's a very nice and robust DeFi platform. When the stablecoin launches, people will be able to create automated market makers that will trade between the stablecoin and any other asset on the XRP ledger. XRP obviously being the most obvious, an interesting one. Real world asset tokenization a lot of the technical capability required to do it is there today. It's just a matter of getting companies, to build and launch. We announced a partnership with a company called Zonix, which is bringing real-world asset tokenization onto the XRP ledger. And then sort of on the other end of the spectrum is features like the lending protocol, which we announced conceptually, but it's in a very early stage where we're looking for community feedback and trying to make sure that the feature addresses, the needs that people want. I think it's worth pointing out an interesting difference between the way DeFi sort of happens on the XRP ledger and the way it happens on other blockchains. So typically on other blockchains, if you wanted to launch some new DeFi product or service on the blockchain, some developer would just write the code and then launch it as a smart contract on the XRP ledger. The XRP ledger currently doesn't support smart contracts. There's some efforts, including one called Hooks, that will bring that capability in the future, but it's not today. So what happens is when someone wants a new DeFi feature like the AMM or like NFTs when they were introduced, or the lending protocol, they introduce it as a blockchain core feature. So that there's advantages and disadvantages. Again, I'd like to argue it's a better approach, but it has some disadvantages and it has advantages and disadvantages. So these XRP ledger core features that are built into the ledger, one big advantage of that is these are very well thought out, carefully vetted, and the tools work well. So you don't have the problem that you might have with an Ethereum-based platform where you agree to some smart contract to do something and then it steals NFTs from you because there aren't smart contracts. Your tool that you're using to interact understands all of these DeFi capabilities because they're core ledger features. So they're all well designed. They're all very efficient. They're fast. They're cheap. The liquidity is concentrated. You don't have 800 DEXs that spread the liquidity out. The disadvantage is you can't come up with an idea, write a smart contract, and push it to the ledger and have it working that afternoon. It means that the development and adoption cycle is slower. So you get these really well-built, really efficient features that cover 90% of what people want to do. But if you're in that 10%, you can't write your own smart contract to do it. Not today, maybe in the future with Hooks. So I won't argue that it's better or worse. It does have a significant disadvantage in that the development cycle is a lot slower and that you can't, if you have some weird use case that needs a smart contract because you have some weird crazy thing that nobody else cares about, but it really matters to your business, you can deploy it on Ethereum, just have someone write the code for you. You can't deploy it to the XRP ledger, but you get these features that are very well thought out that address, very important use cases and that work together smoothly and efficiently. So it's a very different approach to DeFi.
So to push out these DeFi use cases, it essentially needs to be updated. Like the XRP blockchain itself needs to be updated to include these pieces of code.
And that's a faster development cycle than it is with Bitcoin, let's say, because the community understands that, like, if we want to add these new features, we have to design them and so on. And so it's not as slow as Bitcoin, but it's not as fast as you could write a smart contract. You could hire a firm to write a smart contract for you and have it deployed in a weekend, potentially. It can't be that fast. But on the flip side, you don't have this risk of poorly designed smart contracts that create chaos, or tools that don't understand. Like when you agree to a smart contract in an Ethereum wallet, the wallet probably doesn't know what the smart contract does. Whereas like XRP ledger tools understand the AMM feature because it's a ledger feature. They understand how NFTs work, how the DEX works, because those are all core ledger features. So it's an approach that has advantages and disadvantages. If you could only have one, you could argue over which is better, but it's certainly having more choices is nicer because there's some use cases where that's a better choice. And again, that also means that these transactions are fast, cheap, and secure.
Are there any concrete plans of adding a smart contract, adding smart contracts to Ripple?
So there's two plans to add smart contracts to either like the XRP ledger or the ecosystem. So one plan is a sort of side chain that runs EVM smart contracts. So you'll be able to move tokens between the XRP ledger and the side chain, and then the side chain you could just run Ethereum smart contracts on it. So that will bring Ethereum smart contracts sort of to the XRP ledger ecosystem, but not really to the XRP ledger. You would still have an account either on the XRP ledger or the sidechain. If you had both, you would have asset. It's not a seamless experience of like just being able to launch a smart contract right on the XRP ledger. There's an approach that was developed completely outside of Ripple called Hooks, which is a WebAssembly-based smart contract platform. It's not EVM compatible, but it's built in the sort of XRP ledger spirit of keeping things fast, cheap, and secure. It's not quite as powerful as it's not compatible with EVM, so you would have to implement your smart contracts again. And it's not quite as powerful. There's some things that you can do in EVM maybe that are just maybe not as good a fit, or maybe not super easy to do. But it will allow a significant subset, maybe all of the important DeFi use cases, to be implemented without having to update the ledger itself. But that's for the future. That's developed. It's running on real money on a parallel chain called Zahao. And so that's good. That's buying it the kind of real world testing data that you need before you risk like a multi-billion-dollar blockchain on like a radical feature. So that's, it's sort of building up that battle testing.
Are these hooks and sidechains like, is it either or do you think both projects can, work together?
I think both products can work together because the sidechain doesn't require any significant changes to the XRP ledger itself. Hooks is a radical change to the XRP ledger itself, so it's a little bit more complicated. There's a little bit more risk involved, and a little bit more buy-in, that we would have to get. One of the things that you have to remember with the blockchain is like there's a heavy preference for not changing it, because one of the things that makes blockchains great is that you can rely on them working like 2 years from now the same way they were. You don't have to worry about Bitcoin like breaking while you can go away for a couple of years and Bitcoin will probably be exactly the same when you come back. Ethereum, it might change a little bit. It migrated from proof of work to proof of stake, but your stuff is still going to work. Like there's this heavy, that part of the value comes from being able to rely on it. And so making radical changes is very difficult to do. And there's a lot of people whose current feeling is like, even if this is a significant advancement, even if it does make it better, the bias against change is very like, why didn't Bitcoin adopt smart contracts? They could have, but they didn't, because like there's value in having a system that is what Bitcoin is, right? And Ethereum is the smart contract platform. And so it's one of those decisions of like, is there value in having it being what it is?
What do you think?
I think that there's enough benefit from allowing some smart contract features that having none at all is probably not the right. There's sort of intermediary. You can go. You can think of XR like Bitcoin is at one extreme. It doesn't do anything but move Bitcoin. Like people have made it do things with ordinals and inscriptions, but they're really jamming a square peg in a round hole. And on the other extreme, there's blockchains like Ethereum that are completely flexible, and you can upload a contract that does pretty much anything you want, but they have cost issues and security issues. And I think you can maybe stage sort of intermediate positions where you can have some level of flexibility so that you can implement some, reasonable new features without having to get buy-in from the entire ecosystem. And that's kind of what we're trying to think through. And in fact, when Hooks was first implemented on Zahao, they kind of had a switch that they could turn it up in sort of how much power they gave the smart contracts. And as they get more confidence that the system is secure and they're not breaking their consensus algorithm, they're not like blowing up the CPUs, like everything's working fine, they're allowing the smart contracts to sort of have more and more control over what they do. And I think that kind of conservative approach is probably good. We don't want blockchains to be quick to change, particularly if they're worth billions of dollars, because it's hard to fix them if you break them.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Okay, and I know that we're running out of time, and I really want to get to talk at least a little bit about your case with the SEC. I mean, it's been so huge and so pivotal for the whole cryptocurrency ecosystem. This decision that came last year, where it was pretty favorable to Ripple, that there's a court that found XRP was not a security when sold to the public, but the court did find that XRP was a security when sold to institutional investors, and that case is ongoing. So just want your thoughts on like the ruling, like what your argument is there, and what's next on this case. I know there was like some action happening this week as well.
So obviously we were very pleased with the ruling. The SEC didn't seem so pleased, given that they wanted to appeal it immediately. Yeah, and it's exactly what you said. The SEC held that XRP was not inherently a security. It was not itself a security. And Ripple wasn't like selling XRP or using XRP as a security when we sold on exchanges, when we used it to pay vendors, when we gave it to employees as compensation or bonuses. The court did hold that some of our institutional sales sort of looked like an investment contract because they had provisions that were sort of investment-like. That's my non-lawyer understanding of the ruling. And so what's left of the case now is that in those cases where the court did find that Ripple sort of sold XRP as a security or used XRP as a security, the SEC is asking for damages, and we're going to argue over what that is. I think it's important to keep in mind that, like, the United States is an outlier in the world, and how, XRP has been recognized as a cryptocurrency or digital asset that is not a security in a number of other jurisdictions. And, Ripple's licensed and operating around the world. And there's a number of, you've probably seen just recently, we heard that Robinhood received a Wells notice, about their action against Coinbase and so on. It's becoming an issue in the election. It's just an unfortunate situation. I just feel bad for people. Ripple can operate overseas, and we can afford lawyers. I just feel bad for people who are trying to start new projects, and I just have to tell them that you basically just have to leave. You basically just don't do it. Whatever you're doing, you probably just don't want to do it in the United States, because the environment, it's not so much that it's bad, but that it's uncertain. The rules are unclear. We don't know what's legal and what's not. And the SEC is trying to create this clarity one lawsuit at a time. It's just I will say one good thing, though, is that, like, the cryptocurrency space has kind of been forced to work together, which I guess is good. Back a couple of years ago when the SEC was first sued Ripple, we said that, like, this really isn't like the arguments they're making against us, they could make against anybody else. They're not alleging any fraud. They're just alleging technical violations of rules that nobody knows how they apply to digital assets anyway. And the rest of the industry, it took them a while to come around. It took the public a while to come around. But what helped is that they really looked at what Ripple was doing. They looked and saw, hey, there's no accusations of fraud. Like, there's no accusations of market manipulation. And, that's the SEC's case. I'm hoping, and I'm hoping that the United States won't get out of step. Imagine if in the early days of the internet, United States regulators said, like, hey, this is going to be used to, violate copyright. This is going to be used to radicalize terrorists. This is going to be used to, like, threaten national security. And imagine if the United States had, like, clamped down the internet in the United States. Companies like Amazon and Microsoft would still exist. They probably just wouldn't be U.S. companies. We would face a take it or leave it choice with an internet that was very different from the internet we know today. And I'm hoping that there are regulators with the vision, and they do exist, regulators with vision who can say, look, the United States doesn't want to push all of this innovation overseas because, this could have tremendous economic value. And I don't know. It's a little depressing. I tend to just say, just do everything outside the United States if you possibly can right now, because the environment is so uncertain. But it is what it is. So,
it's so it's such a shame to have to say that, right? I hear so many founders and entrepreneurs giving the same recommendation, like don't build inside the US, and to hear it from Ripple, like one of the original cryptocurrency projects and companies, like you've been fighting the SEC all these years, and to hear that from you, it's really a shame what's happening in the US. I agree, but it's maybe encouraging, like you said, to see so many heavyweights in crypto banding together to fight back. So I think Ripple was probably one of the main, or like the first big companies to actually fight back against the SEC. And now we have Uniswap, Consensus, Robinhood also coming out and saying, like, we're not going to just take this. How optimistic are you on crypto winning out this fight? I like our chances in court a lot, but I think what would really help is passing sensible regulation that's more in step with what other countries are doing. For one thing, it would lower the stakes in the regulation. So one of the reasons that I think that the government is digging in the way they are is because they're concerned that this could set precedents that, like, control how the industry is regulated. If Congress would pass regulation, then we're just fighting over, who was right or wrong under the old rules that don't even apply anymore. So if we get better regulation, then I think that's ultimately the solution. Ultimately, it's Congress. For today, it's the courts, because Congress isn't doing anything. So we're going to have to fight on how do rules made in the 1960s and the 1940s apply to technology and, in the 2020s. That's not the best way to do it.
It will probably, I mean, it's becoming an issue in the presidential election in the United States and down ticket races. It's going to be a political issue. Ultimately, Congress is going to, imagine if courts said, hey, the SEC has no authority whatsoever to regulate digital assets. Well, Congress would have no choice, I hope, because bad things could happen, right? Like Ripple didn't commit fraud, but we could have, we could have been evil. We could have been ripping people off, and there are businesses that have been doing that. And a finding that hey, none of these laws apply to crypto wouldn't be a great outcome either. We need some sensible regulation. And so having courts crafted is still going to be regulation by enforcement, even if it's good regulation. It's better to have Congress come up with something sensible. And so I'm hoping, that's gonna be pressure. It's going to take political pressure for that to happen, though. Congress responds to political pressure. So it is nice. Yeah, the industry is more aligned on that, at least.
Absolutely. Okay. And then to wrap up, what's the end game for Ripple? Where do you want to be if everything goes right?
I would like to see Ripple as gluing together enterprise participation in DeFi, being as a one-stop shop for enterprises that want to participate in the DeFi ecosystem, using Ripple's tools and technologies with the XRP ledger, having a significant fraction of the features they want, but also them having the opportunity to access, whatever services are out there that they want. The great thing about the internet isn't Amazon, it isn't Twitter, it isn't any one thing. The great thing about the internet is that everything is it's the everything place. And I think what we need to have a place where people can get to whatever they want. And I'd like to see the XRP ledger providing a significant fraction of those interesting DeFi experiences, particularly the ones that are more enterprise focused, whether they're around lending or real world asset tokenization or, future use cases, liquidity provision, payments. Payments is a big one. We got to get payments right because everything requires lending is a bunch of payments. Real world asset tokenization. What are you going to do with these real world assets? You're going to buy them and you're going to sell them. Those are payments. And so getting payments right, both on the institutional side and on the sort of retail DeFi side. And obviously people holding lots of our stable coin to make those DeFi use cases work. And XRP as the bridge asset that connects those assets together.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David, for taking the time to, talk about this real OG crypto and, how it's pushing forward, building all the, bleeding edge use cases around DeFi and stablecoin today. And of course, the latest on your fight against the SEC. I'm optimistic that rationality will prevail. Crypto is essentially just a technology that enables stuff to work better, payments to work better, financial system to work better. So yeah, I think I'm optimistic that the US will finally see that, and of course it'll be with companies like yours pushing that forward. So thanks again for taking the time. This was amazing.
Thanks, Camilla. Yeah, I'm hopeful that the United States doesn't put itself out of that innovation. Also, I just want to tell your listeners and viewers that Apex in June is a conference in Amsterdam for all things XRP Ledger. I'll be there, so everyone should be there. Amazing.
I think always. It's a great excuse to go to Amsterdam.
I do love Amsterdam very much.
Awesome. Should we expect some announcements there, I guess?
I think we'll have a bunch of announcements about the stablecoin particularly. I can't even tell you what we're announcing. So
yeah, announcement of an announcement for now. We'll definitely cover that. Thanks so much, David, again.
Thank you.